My name is Colonel Marcus Wheeler. For 25 years, I was married to Kathy, to everyone who knew her. Or at least, I thought I knew her. You have no idea what happened at the end of the story. You will be shocked. Watch until the end. I still remember the exact moment when my world shattered into a million pieces. The email notification that pinged on my laptop at 3:27 a.m. while I was stationed at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. After 4 combat tours and 23 years serving my country, I thought I'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. I was wrong. If you're watching this and you're in a military family, hug your loved ones. Tell them you appreciate their sacrifice. Every night, I would touch the worn photograph of us I kept in my breast pocket, right next to my heart, like a talisman against the horrors of war. The photograph was taken on our 5th anniversary. Her smile radiant, her hand protectively resting on her belly. She was 3 months pregnant then. Military life isn't easy on marriages. Everyone knows that. The deployments, the moving every few years, the stress, the danger. When I proposed to Kathy in 1999 on the beach at Coronado, the waves crashing behind us as I dropped to one knee in my dress whites, I laid it all out. This wouldn't be a normal life. There would be birthdays missed, anniversaries celebrated over scratchy satellite calls, and endless nights of worry. She took my face in her hands, her green eyes locking with mine, and said, "I'll be your rock. When everything else in your world is chaos, I'll be the one constant you can count on." And for 2 decades, I believed her. Through deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, South Korea, she was always there when I returned. Always smiling. Always perfect. The house would smell like apple pie, her signature welcome home tradition. She'd run into my arms at every homecoming ceremony, tears streaming down her face, whispering how proud she was, how much she'd miss me. That email came from a name I didn't recognize. Justice Served 86. The subject line read, "Your wife isn't who you think she is." My finger hovered over the delete button as I sat on my cot, the distant sound of helicopters thumping somewhere on the base perimeter. I almost deleted it as spam. God, how I wish I had. Instead, I opened it. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from 4 cups of bitter coffee I downed during my midnight shift at the Tactical Operations Center. Inside was a simple message. "Colonel Wheeler, I respect your service too much to let this continue. Your wife has been living a double life for years. The attached file is proof. I'm sorry." The attachment was a 47-page document. Financial records, photographs, hotel receipts, text message screenshots. My mouth went dry as I scrolled through them. Kathy entering hotels with another man. Kathy laughing over dinner with someone I'd never seen. And most damning of all, a copy of a marriage certificate dated 2018, 7 years before that night in Bagram. It wasn't a fake. Catherine Wheeler had married a man named Victor Ramirez while I was deployed in the Middle East. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile. My knees pressed against the cold concrete floor as I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. 25 years. 2.5 decades of marriage. Was it all a lie? I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Dark circles formed under my eyes as I paced my small room like a caged animal. My second in command, Major Rivera, noticed something was wrong during our morning briefing when I called for fire support on the wrong coordinates. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, concern etched across his weathered face. "Family emergency. I managed to croak out. I requested emergency leave, citing a family crisis." My commanding officer, General Harding, took one look at my face, the same face he'd seen remain stoic during mortar attacks and the loss of men under my command, and approved it without questions. "Whatever it is, Wheeler, handle it and come back whole," he said, gripping my shoulder. The 14-hour flight back to Fort Benning, Georgia, was the longest of my life. Longer than any combat mission. Longer than any recon operation behind enemy lines. I stared out the window of the military transport plane, watching the world pass beneath me, deserts giving way to oceans, oceans to land masses. My mind replayed every moment of my marriage, searching for signs I might have missed. The times she insisted on answering the phone in another room, the weekends visiting old college friends whose names changed from year to year, the separate bank account she maintained for emergencies. Because this time, The enemy was waiting in my own home. I didn't confront her immediately. 23 years in Special Forces teaches you the value of intelligence gathering, the tactical patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. So I watched, and I listened. I rented a nondescript sedan instead of taking a cab from the airport. I set up surveillance in the empty house across the street that had been on the market for months. I followed her to charity events that never existed. One night, I watched through binoculars as she spent 30 minutes on the phone, laughing and twirling her hair the way she used to do with me when we were young. When she hung up, she immediately called someone else, her demeanor completely changing, more serious, more controlled, a different person entirely. What I discovered over those agonizing days made that 47-page document look like a children's bedtime story. Catherine wasn't just married to another man. She was married to 3 other men, all military, all deployed regularly. Master Sergeant James Landon from Fort Hood, Lieutenant Commander Prescott from Naval Station Norfolk, Captain Miguel Santiago from Camp Pendleton, and me, for husbands, all serving our country while she served herself. She had created an intricate rotation system, living with each of us when our deployments aligned in a way that kept her secrets hidden. In my garage, I found a calendar hidden in a locked filing cabinet, with our deployments color-coded like some twisted game of military Tetris. For 15 years, she had maintained 4 separate households, for separate identities and 4 separate lives. She collected military spouse benefits from all 4 marriages. She had access to secure military bases across the country. She knew deployment schedules, unit movements, security protocols. One night, as I sat in that empty house across the street, a terrible thought struck me like a physical blow. I'd been entrusted with classified information throughout my career. Had I ever let something slip? Had I mumbled operational details in my sleep? Had she been recording our conversations? Was she a spy? A con artist? Both? I couldn't be sure. What I did know was that she had violated not just my trust, but potentially national security. My hand shook with rage as I dialed a number I'd never thought I'd need to use against my own wife. I contacted JAG, the Judge Advocate General's Corps. The JAG officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Colonel Harrison, listened in silence as I laid out what I knew, her expression revealing nothing until I finished. "Colonel Wheeler," she said finally, her voice gentle but firm, "this is beyond our scope now. This is FBI territory." Then the FBI. Special Agent Donovan arrived at my hotel room within an hour, his face grim as I shared the evidence I'd gathered. He made a call, speaking in clipped tones about potential national security implications. Then Army CID joined the investigation. What started as a personal betrayal quickly escalated into a full federal investigation. The hardest part? I had to keep pretending everything was normal while they built their case. Had to kiss her goodbye each morning, tasting the lies on her lips. Had to hold her at night, feeling my skin crawl with every touch. Had to listen to her lies about volunteer work at the base family center, when she was actually flying to California to be with husband number 3. "I'm so proud of the work you do for this country," she told me one night over dinner, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Not many women could handle what military wives go through. I nearly shattered the wine glass in my grip. "What about you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. "Do you ever regret marrying a soldier?" She smiled that perfect smile, the one I once thought was just for me. "Never. Being an Army wife is my calling. It's who I am." I excused myself to the bathroom and punched the wall until my knuckles bled. It took 6 weeks for the authorities to compile enough evidence. 6 weeks of living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. 6 weeks of wondering if the last 25 years of my life had been real at all. Did she ever love me? Was there even a single genuine moment in our quarter century together? During those sleepless nights, my mind kept returning to the darkest chapters of our marriage, the miscarriages. 2 of them. The first happened in 2005, during my second deployment to Iraq. I was leading a reconnaissance mission near Fallujah when the satellite call came through. The connection was terrible, her voice breaking up as she told me she'd lost our baby at 14 weeks. "I need you, Marcus," she had sobbed through static. "Please come home." But I couldn't. Operation Red Dawn was at a critical juncture. My men needed me. My country needed me. I told her I'd request emergency leave, but we both knew it would be denied. "I understand," she'd said, her voice suddenly calm. Too calm. This is the life I signed up for. When I finally made it home 3 months later, she seemed recovered. The nursery we started planning remained an empty room, the door always closed. We never spoke about it. I threw myself back into my work, and she supported me without complaint. The perfect military wife. The second miscarriage came in 2009. I was stateside this time, but preparing for deployment to Afghanistan. 6 months of intensive training at Fort Bragg. I made it to the hospital 4 hours after she called. She was already cleaned up, changed, ready to go home as if nothing had happened. 17 weeks, the doctor told me quietly in the hallway. The fetus was developing normally. These things just happen sometimes. I requested a week's leave. My commanding officer granted it reluctantly. "Wheeler, I know this is difficult, but we deploy in 3 weeks. The men need you focused." I spent that week trying to comfort Kathy, but she remained distant, almost attached. I mistook it for grief, for her own coping mechanism. Now I wonder if it was simply indifference, if those lost children were just collateral damage in her mission. One night during that leave, I broke down. The weight of guilt crushed me as I sat on the edge of our bed, head in my hands. Maybe if I had a different career, I whispered. Kathy sat beside me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Don't you dare blame yourself," she said firmly. "You serve your country. That's who you are, who I married. We can try again when the time is right." But we never did. There was always another deployment, another promotion, another move. I buried myself in my career, and she never complained. Never once said that my choices had cost us our family. "Some people aren't meant to be parents," she told me on our 15th anniversary, after too many glasses of wine. "Maybe we're meant for different things." I had nodded, grateful for her understanding, for her sacrifice. For years, I carried the guilt that my dedication to my country had cost us the family we might have had. Now I wonder if those pregnancies were even real, if those losses were just another performance in her elaborate charade. Another way to bind me to her was shared grief, while ensuring she never had to actually bear my child. Then came the day I'll never forget. The spring sunshine streamed through our kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the granite countertops Kathy had insisted on installing during our last remodel. Birds chirped outside, oblivious to the human drama about to unfold. "You're quiet this morning," Kathy said, buttering her toast like it was any other Tuesday. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, highlighting the delicate features I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I looked up from my coffee, studying her face, memorizing it one last time, just thinking about that trip you're taking next week to visit your sister in Phoenix. She smiled, taking a sip of her orange juice. "I've been looking forward to it for months. Poor Linda really needs a company since her divorce. Plus, I found this amazing spot we can go to. Girls' weekend, you know?" I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. Funny thing about Linda. Her hand paused, the knife hovering over her toast. "What's that?" "She doesn't exist." The butter knife clattered to the plate. For just a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. I saw calculation in those eyes. Not fear, not shame, just cold, hard calculation. "What are you talking about?" She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've seen her pictures. I've talked to her on the phone while you were in the room." "No," I said quietly. "I've seen pictures of a woman you claim is your sister. I've heard you talk to someone you call Linda. But your sister, your real sister, died of leukemia when you were 12. At least, that's what Magdalena Kislova's records show. The look on her face, I'll take that to my grave. The perfect facade crumbling, like a sand castle at high tide. Then the FBI tactical team burst through our front door, black-clad agents swarming into our kitchen, shouting commands that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "FBI, on the ground. Now." "Kathy, no, Magdalena," moved with shocking speed. She flipped the kitchen table, sending my coffee mug shattering against the wall, and lunged for the knife block. Special Agent Donovan tackled her before she could reach it, both of them crashing into our refrigerator, sending magnets and family photos scattering across the floor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those smiling vacation photos, all part of her cover story. They found 11 passports with her photo, but different names in a hidden compartment behind the false bottom of our bedroom dresser. Bank accounts totaling over $3.7 million scattered across banks in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Dubai. And most disturbing of all, classified documents she had no business possessing, meticulously organized in a watertight container buried beneath the rose bushes she tended every Sunday. The case broke wide open. It wasn't just about multiple marriages or stolen benefits anymore. Catherine, whose real name turned out to be Magdalena Koslova, was part of a Russian deep-cover operation targeting military families. She was planted here in the mid-'90s. Agent Donovan explained as we sat in a secure debriefing room at the FBI field office, the harsh fluorescent lights making his face look gaunt. The marriage to you was her first major operation. You were handpicked, Wheeler, young officer with potential, on track for advancement. Why me? I asked, my voice barely audible. Your security clearance, your specialization in counterterrorism, your close relationship with foreign military liaisons. You were the perfect target. 25 years. My entire adult life was a counterintelligence operation, and I never suspected a thing. The photos from our honeymoon in Hawaii, the Christmas mornings, the anniversaries, the time she nursed me back to health after I took shrapnel in Fallujah, all a calculated performance. 3 months after her arrest, I received a commendation for my unwitting contribution to national security. The ceremony was small, private, no press. The brass had the decency to look embarrassed as they pinned another medal on my chest. Will you give a man who unknowingly helped capture a foreign agent by being the perfect dupe for a quarter century? Your cooperation was invaluable, Colonel, said the CIA deputy director, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who never gave his full name. Once you alerted authorities, we were able to identify 3 other sleeper agents in her network. I stared at the medal in its blue velvet box. 25 years of my life, and all I get is this? He had no answer for that. Magdalena was stripped of her fraudulent citizenship and deported after providing information on her network. The last I saw of her was on a courtroom monitor during the closed proceedings, being led away in handcuffs, her face expressionless. The woman I had loved for 25 years looked right through me like I was a stranger. I asked for 5 minutes alone with her before deportation. 5 minutes with the woman I'd built a life with. They granted it. A small room with a table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs facing each other. Was any of it real? I asked, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. Any moment in 25 years? She studied me with those green eyes that had once been my entire world. When she finally spoke, her American accent was gone, replaced by a slight Slavic inflection. Does it matter now? It matters to me. She leaned forward, the handcuffs clinking against the metal table. The night you came back from your first deployment to Afghanistan, when you woke up screaming, and I held you until dawn, that was real. I wasn't expecting that. You surprised me. It wasn't much, but it was something. A week after the deportation hearing, I found myself sitting in a dive bar just outside Fort Benning. The place was dimly lit, the air thick with cigarette smoke despite the state ban, classic rock playing from ancient speakers. It was a kind of establishment that asked no questions and expected none in return, perfect for a disgraced colonel with nowhere else to go. You look like 10 miles of bad road, Wheeler. I didn't need to look up to recognize that gravelly voice. Master Sergeant Frank Delgado slid onto the bar stool next to mine, signaling the bartender for 2 whiskeys. Frank and I had served together for nearly 20 years, from Kosovo to Kandahar. He'd saved my life twice, and I'd returned the favor once. The kind of bond that doesn't break, even when everything else does. Thought you were still in Germany, I muttered, staring into my empty glass. Got back 3 days ago. Heard what happened. Frank accepted the whiskey from the bartender and slid one my way. Figured you could use a friendly face. You hear the whole story? Enough of it. Russian spy, multiple husbands, the works. He took a sip of his whiskey. Gotta say, Wheeler, when you get screwed, you really go all out. Despite everything. I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. That was Frank. Irreverent to the core, even in the face of disaster. 25 years, Frank. How did I not see it? Because you weren't looking for it. He shrugged. None of us would have been. Hell, Thompson's wife left him for the pool boy, and he never saw that coming either. Different scale, same principle. She was spying on our military operations, using me to get access. Frank's weathered face grew serious. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's a clusterfuck of epic proportions. But you know what? In our line of work, we're trained to see the enemy coming from a mile away, not from across the pillow. I down my whiskey in one gulp, welcoming the burn. The brass thinks I'm compromised, that I might have leaked information without knowing it. The brass can go fuck themselves. Frank signaled for another round. You've given everything to this country. Lost your hearing in one ear in Baghdad. Took shrapnel in Fallujah. Missed half your life for deployments. And now what? They think you were in on it? That you're some kind of Manchurian candidate. They didn't say that, but nothing. You got played by a professional. A goddamn deep cover operative who fooled not just you, but the entire U.S. military establishment for decades. He leaned closer. You know what that makes you? Human. And last I checked, that wasn't a court-martial offense. I stared at my fresh drink. I can't stop thinking about the miscarriages. Frank's expression softened slightly. The what now? She had 2 miscarriages. Or at least, she said she did. Now I don't know if they were real or if that was just part of her cover. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Marcus. That's some dark psychological warfare right there. What kind of person would fake something like that? The kind you're trained to kill, not marry. He raised his glass. To the devil wearing Prada. We drank in silence for a while, the bar filling up around us with young soldiers fresh from basic training, their faces still smooth, eyes still bright with possibility. You know what the worst part is? I finally said, I still miss her. The her I thought I knew. Frank nodded slowly. That woman doesn't exist, brother. Never did. You're mourning a ghost. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you're not mourning her. You're mourning the life you thought you had. He finished his drink. 25 years is a long time to lose. Tell me about it. So what now? Witness protection? I shook my head, turned it down. Frank laughed, a short, sharp bark. Stubborn as ever. Good. New name wouldn't suit you anyway. What would you do? I asked. He considered this, running a finger around the rim of his glass. Me? I'd probably drink myself to death in about 6 months. He grinned, but his eyes remained serious. But you're not me. You're the guy who held a position for 36 hours in Ramadi with just 3 men and a limited ammo supply. The guy who carried Johnson 3 miles with a bullet in your own leg. That was different. That was war. I knew the enemy. This is war too, Marcus. Different battlefield. Same principles. Assess, adapt, overcome. He clapped me on the shoulder. Or, just wallow in self-pity until you start collecting cats and writing conspiracy theories on the internet. For the first time in months, I laughed. It felt foreign, almost painful, like a muscle long and used. There he is, Frank said with satisfaction. Knew you were still in there somewhere. You always were a pain in the ass. Delgado. Par my charm. He glanced at his watch. Look, I gotta head out. The new wife gets twitchy if I'm late. Unlike your ex, she's just garden variety crazy, not international espionage crazy. As he stood to leave, I grabbed his arm. Frank, thanks. He nodded once. When you figure out your next move, call me, unless it involves crying into your beer. For that, you're on your own. After Frank left, I stayed at the bar, his words echoing in my mind. Assess, adapt, overcome. Maybe there was a path forward after all. Unfortunately, Not everyone in my life offered such clarity. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in my Aunt Helen's floral-patterned living room in Savannah, surrounded by porcelain figurines and the smell of mothballs. Aunt Helen, my mother's older sister and my only remaining family, had insisted I visit after hearing about the unfortunate dissolution of my marriage. Her words, not mine. At 78, she was a Southern belle of the old school, with firm opinions on everything from proper tea service to international espionage, apparently. "Now, Marcus, dear," she said, pouring tea from a china pot that probably predated the Civil War, "I know you're hurt, but have you considered that perhaps Catherine was forced into the situation?" I stared at her, dumbfounded. Forced? Aunt Helen. She was a trained Russian operative. She waved her hand dismissively, bracelets jangling. These foreign governments can be very persuasive. Maybe they threaten her family back home. Did you ever think of that? She volunteered for the assignment. She spent decades spying on our military. Well, Aunt Helen sniffed. Perhaps if you had been home more often, she wouldn't have been susceptible to such influences. A woman needs attention, Marcus. All those deployments, all those years away. I set my teacup down carefully, afraid I might shatter in my grip. Are you suggesting that my military service drove my wife to commit espionage? I'm just saying that marriage is a partnership. Catherine must have been very lonely. She leaned forward, patting my knee. And those miscarriages, such a strain on any relationship. Perhaps she was simply looking for comfort elsewhere. With 3 other husbands? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Aunt Helen's eyes widened behind her bifocals. Well, I didn't know about that part. She recovered quickly. But still, the heart wants what it wants. And Catherine was always such a lovely hostess at the officers' functions. Remember that Christmas party at Fort Bragg? Her gingerbread house won first prize. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Aunt Helen, she was gathering intelligence that could have gotten American soldiers killed. Soldiers under my command. Well, she sniffed, straightening an antimacassar on the arm of her chair. I suppose none of us really knows what goes on in a marriage except the 2 people in it. I stood up, unable to take any more. Thank you for the tea, Aunt Helen, but I need to get going. You'll find someone new, dear, she called as I headed for the door. Perhaps someone more patriotic this time. I didn't respond. There was no point. Aunt Helen lived in a world where the worst betrayal imaginable was showing up to church in white shoes after Labor Day. But her misguided attempt at comfort had clarified something for me. I couldn't keep the story to myself. Too many people would try to rewrite it, to soften its edges, to make it palatable. The truth needed to be told, raw and unvarnished. I retired from the Army 6 months later. 23 years in uniform, for combat tours, 11 medals, and my greatest service to my country was being fooled by a woman who never loved me. I retired from the Army 6 months later. 23 years in uniform, for combat tours, 11 medals, and my greatest service to my country was being fooled by a woman who never loved me. At least, that's what I told myself until the first letter arrived. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from a small town in Oregon I'd never heard of. My name was written in an unfamiliar handwriting, not Kathy's flowing script that I'd recognized for decades. I almost threw it away with the junk mail, but something made me pause. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the message typed in a standard font. You can change your address, Marcus, but you can't hide from me. We're not finished. I called Special Agent Donovan immediately. He arrived the next morning, bagging the letter and envelope for forensic analysis. Could be nothing, he said, but the tightness around his eyes told me he didn't believe that. Probably just someone who read about your case in one of those classified briefings that leaked. Some sicko getting their kicks. But I knew better. There was something in the phrasing, something intimately threatening that felt personal. It had to be her. I thought she was deported, I said, watching Donovan carefully catalog the evidence. She was back to Russia. We have confirmation she arrived in Moscow 8 months ago. He hesitated. But after that, we lost track of her. You lost track of her? My voice rose. She's one of the most significant counterintelligence cases in decades, and you lost her? Donovan had the decency to look embarrassed. These people are ghosts, Wheeler. It's what they're trained for. But don't worry. This is probably nothing more than psychological warfare. She can't hurt you anymore. He was wrong. The letters kept coming, one every 2 weeks, each from a different location. Seattle, Miami, Toronto, Phoenix. The FBI installed security cameras around my property, had my mail screened at a secure facility before it reached me, and placed an agent in the house across the street. But still, they came. The threats in the early letters were vague but menacing. Do you check under your bed at night, Marcus? You should. I wonder if your new neighbors know who you really are? What you've done. Remember Fallujah? I know what happened there. Everyone will know soon. That last one sent ice through my veins. Fallujah was where I'd made the hardest call of my military career. Ordering an airstrike on a building we believed held enemy combatants, only to discover later it contained civilians as well. The operation was classified, the details known only to those with the highest clearance levels. And Kathy. I'd broken protocol one night, drunk on guilt and whiskey, and told her everything. She's trying to destabilize you, the bureau psychiatrist told me during a mandatory counseling session. This is classic psychological manipulation. She's reminding you of her power, making you question what else she might know, what secret she might reveal. 3 months after the first letter, the tone changed. The threats gave way to something far more unsettling, intimacy. I still remember how you taste, Marcus. Do you remember how I taste? 25 years of lying beside you, and I still miss the sound of your breathing when you sleep. Remember that night in San Diego, when the power went out at the hotel, and we made love by candlelight? That wasn't for the mission. That was just for us. Each letter contained details so specific, so private, that I found myself questioning everything all over again. Had there been moments of genuine connection amid the years of deception? The thought tortured me more than the threats ever could. She's playing you, Frank told me bluntly when he came to visit, helping me install additional security measures around the cottage. This is what these people do. They find the crack in your armor and drive a wedge right into it. I know, I said, but part of me didn't believe it. Part of me, a part one hated, wanted to believe there had been something real between us, even if just for a moment. The dreams started around the same time. Vivid, disorienting dreams where Kathy, no, Magdalena, would appear in my bedroom, sitting at the edge of my bed, watching me with those green eyes. Did you ever really know me, Marcus? Dream Magdalena would ask, her accent now distinctly Russian. Or did you only see what you wanted to see? Sometimes in the dreams, she would crawl into bed beside me, her body as familiar as my own, and whisper operational details in my ear, classified information that made me wake in a cold sweat, frantically checking to make sure I was alone, that it was just a nightmare. I stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. Dark circles formed under my eyes. The local shopkeepers in town started giving me concerned looks when I came in for supplies. You know, there's a good doctor in Brunswick, Mrs. Calloway at the general store suggested one day, eyeing me as I fumbled with my wallet, for folks who have trouble sleeping. I thanked her and left quickly. The last thing I needed was medication that would make me more vulnerable during the night. Then came the package. Unlike the letters, it was delivered by courier, a bored-looking young man in a company uniform who had me sign for it before speeding away in his van. The box was small, about the size of a hardcover book, wrapped in brown paper with my name and address printed on a label. I called Donovan before opening it, waiting the excruciating 4 hours it took for him and the FBI forensics team to arrive. They scanned it, declared it free of explosives or biological agents, and carefully cut through the wrapping. Inside was a digital photo frame. When they plugged it in, my blood ran cold. There I was, asleep in my own bed, the timestamp showing 3:17 a.m. just 3 nights ago. The next image showed me in my kitchen making coffee, then sitting on my porch reading. Image after image, all taken inside my home within the past week. Sweep the house. Donovan barked his team. Every inch. They found 7 cameras in total, 1 in a smoke detector, 1 disguised as an electrical outlet, 1 in the bathroom mirror. The most disturbing was the one inside the bedside clock, a gift I'd received 2 months earlier, delivered to my door with a card that read, "From a grateful nation, thank you for your service." I'd assumed it was from one of the veterans organizations I'd recently spoken to about PTSD. She had helped, Donovan said grimly as the team removed the devices. She couldn't have planted these herself if she's still out of the country. Unless she isn't, I replied, the realization dawning on me. What if she never went to Russia? What if the deportation was staged? Donovan shook his head. Impossible. We put her on the plane ourselves. There were guards, protocols. And she fooled an entire military intelligence apparatus for 25 years. I reminded him, you think a deportation detail will be beyond her capabilities? The question hung between us, unanswered. That night, after the FBI team left, promising increased surveillance protection, I sat alone in my living room, every light in the house blazing. I'd gone through each room with a flashlight and a mirror, checking every fixture, every piece of furniture for additional cameras they might have missed. My secure phone, provided by the FBI after the first letter, rang just after midnight. Wheeler. There was silence on the other end, just soft breathing. Hello, I said, my hand tightening on the phone. Do you like the gifts I've been sending, Marcus? The voice was hers, but different. The American accent gone, replaced by a subtle Russian inflection I'd never heard during our marriage. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did you get this number? A soft laugh. The same way I got your last 6 numbers. The same way I got into your house. A pause. The same way I could get to you right now if I wanted to. I was already moving, checking the door locks, the windows. What do you want? Want? Such a simple question for such a complicated situation. She sighed, the sound achingly familiar. Perhaps I simply want you to understand what it feels like to be watched, to have your life under constant surveillance, to never know what's real and what's part of the operation. You're insane. No, Marcus. I'm very, very good at my job. There was a hardness in her voice now, a job that isn't finished. The FBI is tracing this call right now. I bluffed, knowing it was probably useless. She was too careful, too professional. Of course they are. I'll be gone long before they pinpoint the location. She paused. But before I go, there's something you should know. Something about Operation Blackbird. My blood froze. Operation Blackbird had been a classified extraction mission in Syria 5 years ago. 3 American operatives captured, tortured, executed. I'd been peripherally involved in the planning, but had pulled out when the parameters changed. The mission had gone sideways, but few people knew the full details, or my role in its failure. How do you know about it? She finished for me. Because you talk in your sleep, darling. Always have. All those nights you'd wake up sweating, muttering about Blackbird. It wasn't hard to piece together, especially with access to your private files. Those files were encrypted. I said my mouth dry, and your password was the date we met, followed by my middle name. Her voice softened, sentimental to the end. That was always your weakness, Marcus. You want so badly to believe in love. The call ended abruptly. I immediately contacted Donovan, relaying the conversation verbatim. Within an hour, my cottage was swarming with federal agents again, this time including a team from the NSA. Operation Blackbird is still highly classified. The NSA representative, a stern woman who only gave her name as Jenkins, told me the fact that she's threatening to expose details is a matter of national security. She's blackmailing me, I said, the realization dawning. But I don't understand what she wants. Maybe it's not about what she wants, Donovan suggested. Maybe it's about what she doesn't want. You're sharing what you know about her network. The thought had crossed my mind. I've been approached multiple times by intelligence agencies wanting me to consult on Russian sleeper agents, to help identify behavioral patterns or operational signatures based on my experience with Magdalena. I declined each time, wanting only to put the past behind me. So what's my play here? I asked, give in to whatever demands come next? Jenkins exchanged a look with Donovan. Actually, we'd like you to engage. Draw her out. Make her think you're vulnerable, willing to negotiate. You want to use me as bait, I said flatly. We want to capitalize on the one advantage we have, her apparent fixation on you, Jenkins countered. This may be our only chance to bring her back into custody and unravel whatever operation she's still running. I laughed bitterly. Haven't I given enough? 25 years of my life wasn't sufficient sacrifice in my country. Donovan sighed. Wheeler, no one would blame you for walking away. You've been through hell. But the reality is, she's not going to stop. The surveillance, the letters, the calls, they'll continue until she gets what she wants or until we catch her. And right now, You're our best shot at the latter. I thought about it all night, weighing my options, what little remained of them. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would play along, become the bait in their trap. Not for the country this time, but for myself, for the chance to finally look Magdalena in the eye and get the answers I deserved. The next letter arrived 3 days later. This one was different. Handwritten in the familiar script I'd seen on countless anniversary cards and grocery lists over the years. My dearest Marcus, I wonder if you figured it out yet. How deep the deception goes. It's not just about us. It never was. You're a small piece in a much larger game. Do you remember our trip to Santorini? How you marveled at the blue domes against the white buildings. How we made love on the balcony of our villa, the Aegean spread out before us like a blanket of stars. I've kept something from that trip, something that belongs to you, something you never knew existed. If you want it back, come alone to the place where you first told me you loved me. You'll know when. Always yours in some way. M. Santorini. Our 5th anniversary. One of the few vacations where I hadn't been called back early for deployment or training. One of the few perfect memories I had of our marriage. Or so I thought. She's trying to lure you somewhere. Donovan said when I showed him the letter. The question is, where and when? I knew immediately. Coronado Beach. That's where I first told her I loved her. March 15th, 1999. Our 3rd date. Donovan nodded. March 15th. That's next week. The Ides of March. I said quietly. How appropriate. The FBI spent the next week planning the operation. I would appear to come alone, but there would be agents positioned throughout the area. Surveillance on every approach. If Magdalena showed herself, they would take her into custody. What did she mean about something from Santorini? Jenkins asked her in the final briefing. Any idea what she might have that belongs to you? I shook my head. We didn't bring much back. Some pottery, photographs. Nothing of real value. It could be a metaphor, the FBI's behavioral analyst suggested. Something intangible. A revelation, perhaps. Or it could be another mind game, I thought, but didn't say. The morning of March 15th dawned clear and cool. I drove to Coronado Beach alone as planned, my car rigged with tracking devices, a wire taped to my chest beneath my shirt. I walked to the exact spot where I dropped the 1 knee all those years ago, where I pledged my life and love to a woman who never existed. The beach was relatively empty, a Monday morning in early spring. Too cold for tourists, but perfect for a clandestine meeting. I stood facing the ocean, hands in my pockets, waiting. Hours passed. The tide came in, then began to retreat. My earpiece remained silent save for occasional check-ins from Donovan's team. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Nothing. As dusk approached, Donovan's voice came through my earpiece. We're calling it. She's not coming. I felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment as I turned to leave. Had it all been another manipulation? Another way to make me dance to her tune? That's when I saw the woman sitting on a bench near the boardwalk, a large envelope in her hands. She was in her mid-20s, dark-haired, completely unfamiliar to me. Colonel Wheeler? She called as I approached the parking lot. I stopped, tensing. Through my earpiece, I heard Donovan. We see her. Hold position. We're running facial recognition. Yes. I replied cautiously. The woman stood, walking toward me with the envelope extended. I was paid to deliver this to you. The woman said you'd be here today. What woman? Where is she? I demanded, perhaps too forcefully. The young woman took a step back. I don't know. It was an online gig. $500 to hand you this envelope at this beach today. That's all I know, I swear. It's clean, came Donovan's voice in my ear after a moment. No explosives, no chemical agents. You can take it. I accepted the envelope, and the woman quickly retreated to a waiting rideshare vehicle. Inside the envelope was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph nearly brought me to my knees. A young woman, perhaps 20 years old, with my jawline and Kathy's, Magdalena's green eyes. She was standing in front of a university building, laughing at something off-camera, unaware she was being photographed. The note read, her name is Alexandra. She lives in Moscow. She believes her father was a Russian diplomat who died when she was an infant. She has your smile, your determination, and unfortunately, your stubbornness. The pregnancies weren't all lies, Marcus, just the miscarriages. She is what belongs to you from Santorini. Conceived there, born in secret. My insurance policy, though I never needed to use her as such. If you want to know your daughter, come to Moscow. Alone. I'll find you. This is not about espionage anymore. This is about family, the real one we created despite all the lies. The choice is yours. M. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the sand, the photograph clutched in my trembling hands. Through the roaring in my ears, I barely heard Donovan's voice asking what was wrong, what the envelope contained. A daughter. I had a daughter. A child I never knew existed. Now a young woman with my features and her mother's eyes. A child raised on lies, just as I had been. Wheeler, talk to me. What's in the envelope? Donovan was saying urgently. I tucked the photograph and note back into the envelope. Nothing. I lied. Just another mind game. That night, alone in my hotel room, I stared at the photograph for hours, searching for myself in the young woman's features, for any sign that this wasn't just another elaborate deception. The shape of her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way her head tilted slightly when she smiled, all hauntingly familiar. Could it be true? Had Magdalena secretly carried my child to term during one of my lengthy deployments, given birth somewhere beyond my knowledge, and arranged for the girl to be raised in Russia? It seemed far-fetched, logistically impossible, and yet this was a woman who had maintained multiple identities and marriages simultaneously for years. Managing a secret pregnancy and child would have been challenging, but not beyond her capabilities. My secure phone rang just after midnight. Unknown number. Have you made your decision? Magdalena's voice, soft and intimate. How do I know she's real? I asked, my voice rough with emotion. How do I know this isn't just another one of your manipulations? DNA doesn't lie, Marcus. Check your email. I've sent you her medical records from birth. The blood type matches yours, AB negative. Rare, as you know. I moved to my laptop, finding the email from an anonymous address. The records appeared authentic, detailed medical documentation from a Moscow hospital dated 9 months after our Santorini trip. Mother's name listed as Magdalena Koslov. Father unknown. Blood type AB negative, matching mine exactly, as she'd said. Why? I finally managed. Why keep her a secret all these years? A pause. Initially, it was practical. A child would have complicated my mission. Then, as she grew, I found I wanted to keep her separate from my American life, from the lies. Her voice softened. She became the one true thing in my world, the one person I didn't have to pretend with. And now you're using her to manipulate me. I said bitterly, No, Marcus, I'm offering you a choice, a chance to know your daughter before it's too late. Too late? What does that mean? Is she in danger? A humorless laugh. We're all in danger. But that's not what I meant. Alexandra has questions about her father. Questions I've deflected for years. She's smart, resourceful. Eventually, she'll start searching for answers on her own. Wouldn't you rather she hear the truth or some version of it from you? I close my eyes, try to think through the fog of emotion. This could all be an elaborate trap. Of course it could, she conceded. Just as I could have killed you a dozen times over the past year, if that was my goal. I've been in your house, Marcus. Watch you sleep. If I wanted you dead, you would be... The casual way she confirmed my worst fears sent a chill down my spine. Why should I trust anything you say? You shouldn't, she said simply. But ask yourself this. What would I gain from creating such an elaborate lie? What strategic value would this particular deception serve after all this time? I had no answer for that. Think about it, she continued. But don't take too long. Alexandra graduates in May. After that, she plans to travel. Finding her will become considerably more difficult. The line went dead. I spent the next week in a haze. The photograph of the young woman, my daughter, never far from my hands. I had the medical records analyzed by experts provided by Donovan, who was now fully briefed on Magdalena's latest bombshell. The documents appeared legitimate, though as Donovan pointed out, forging medical records would be child's play for an operation with Russian intelligence resources. It's another manipulation, Wheeler, he insisted during our daily briefing. She's playing on your emotions, on your deepest regrets. The child you never had with her. She knows exactly where your vulnerability lies. And if it's true, I countered. If I really do have a daughter out there? Donovan's expression softened slightly. Then we'll find a way to verify it and make contact through proper channels. But flying to Moscow, into the arms of a known intelligence operative who has spent the last year psychologically torturing you? That's suicide. I knew he was right. Logically, rationally, I knew it. But logic had little power against the image of that young woman with my jawline and Magdalena's eyes, against the possibility, however remote, that I had a child out there who didn't know I existed. In the end, it was Frank who provided the clarity I needed. He arrived unannounced at my cottage in Maine 2 weeks after Coronado, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Donovan called me. He said by way of explanation, dropping his bag inside the door, said you were about to do something monumentally stupid. I showed him the photograph. The note explained Magdalena's claim. He studied everything carefully, his weathered face revealing nothing. You believe her? He finally asked. I don't know what to believe anymore. Frank nodded, considering. Let's say it's true. Let's say you do have a daughter in Russia. What then? You fly to Moscow, alone, to meet a woman who has manipulated and deceived you at every turn? Best case scenario, you end up disappointed when you discover it's another lie. Worst case, you end up in a shallow grave outside Moscow or in some FSB interrogation cell. I know the risks, I said quietly. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're willing to throw away everything, including the new life you start build here, on the word professional liar. He gestured around the cottage I'd spent months renovating. All of this, just to chase another ghost. She's not a ghost if she's real, I said stubbornly. And if she is real, what then? You think the FSB is just going to let you waltz in, make contact with the daughter of one of their deep cover operatives, and waltz back out? You think they'll let you bring her back to the States? You're delusional. His words hit home in a way Donovan's never could. He was right. Even if Alexandra existed, even if she was my daughter, what realistic chance did I have of developing any kind of relationship with her? The daughter of a Russian spy and an American military officer? International politics, and espionage would always stand between us. So I'm supposed to just, what? Pretend I never saw this? Never knew. Frank sighed heavily. No, you're supposed to be smarter than the people trying to destroy you. If you want to know if this girl exists, if she's really your daughter, there are ways to find out that don't involve walking willingly into an FSB trap. And so began Operation Verification, as Frank jokingly called it. Through his extensive network of contacts, many still active in various intelligence communities, we began the painstaking process of trying to verify Alexander's existence from a safe distance. It took months. DNA testing through unofficial channels, background checks, academic record searches. Each piece of information was like a shard of glass, sharp, potentially dangerous, incomplete on its own. Meanwhile, the letters from Magdalena continued, now filled with details about Alexander's life. Her favorite subjects in school, how she played the violin, her dream of becoming a doctor. Each letter both a torture and a gift. 6 months after Coronado, we finally had our answer. Alexandra Koslov existed. She was a student at Moscow State University, studying medicine. She was 20 years old. And according to DNA analysis performed on a sample obtained through means I preferred not to examine too closely, she was almost certainly my biological daughter. The night Frank brought me the final confirmation, we sat on my porch in silence for a long time, watching the waves crash against a rocky Maine coastline. So what now? He finally asked. I had asked myself that question 1,000 times over the previous months. What did I want? What was possible? What was best for Alexandra, a young woman who had lived her entire life without knowing I existed? Now, I said slowly, I write her a letter, the truth, or as much of it as she can handle. Who I am, that I never knew about her until recently. That I would like to know her if she's willing, but I understand if she's not. Frank nodded, approving. And Magdalena? I had thought about that too. The woman who had destroyed my life, who had lied to me for 25 years, who had psychologically tortured me for months, and who had, it seemed, given me a daughter. I don't know. I admitted, part of me still hates her for what she did. Another part still loves who you thought she was. Frank finished for me. Is that insane? He shrugged. Probably. But then again, your life stopped making sense the moment you got that first email in Bagram. Why start expecting sanity now? We laughed together, the sound carried away by the ocean breeze. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Not because the wounds had healed, they never would fully heal, but because I had finally stopped bleeding. You know she'll intercept any letter you try to send Alexandra, Frank pointed out after a while. I'm counting on it, I replied. That letter will be for both of them. 2 weeks later, I mailed a thick envelope to Moscow, addressed to Alexandra Koslov at her university. Inside was the story of my life. The true story, not the redacted version that had been released to the press. I wrote about meeting her mother, about our years together, about my career and deployments. I wrote about learning of her existence and the months spent verifying it. I wrote about my hopes, my regrets, my fears. And at the end, I wrote, I don't know if you'll ever read these words, Alexandra. I don't know if you'll want to know the man who contributed to half your DNA, but has never been a father to you. That choice belongs to you, and I will respect whatever you decide. To Magdalena, who I know will read this first, thank you for giving me a daughter, even if I never had the chance to watch her grow. In a life built on deception, she appears to be the one true thing. Whatever else was false between us, she is real. And for that, I can never fully hate you, despite everything else. I'm not coming to Moscow. I won't play that game. But I'll be here, in this little cottage by the sea, if either of you ever wants to find me. On your terms, not mine. Not as part of any operation or agenda. Just as people try and make sense of the tangled web we've all been caught in. The truth hurts, but lies destroy. And I'm tired of destruction. I included my address and secure email address set up specifically for this purpose, then sealed the envelope and sent it on its journey across the ocean, carried with it whatever remained of my past, and perhaps the first tentative thread of a future I had never imagined. 3 months passed with no response. Then 6. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that the act of writing the letter had been cathartic enough. Frank visited occasionally, bringing news from his travels and stories to distract me from the silence. Then, on a cold December morning, almost exactly 1 year after Coronado, a notification appeared on my secure email. The message was brief. I received your letter. I have questions. Many questions. I will be in New York next month for a medical conference. Perhaps we could meet. A. Koslova. Below was a contact number with an international code. My hands trembled as I read and reread those few sentences. Was it really her? Or another of Magdalena's manipulations? Did it matter? After everything I'd been through, didn't I deserve to find out? I called Frank before I could talk myself out of it. It could still be a trap, he cautioned after I read in the email. I know. You going anyway? I thought about all the times in my military career I'd calculated risk against potential reward. All the missions that could have ended in disaster, but had to be attempted anyway. All the moments that defined a life. Yes, I said finally. I'm going. Then I'm coming with you, Frank replied without hesitation. Someone's out to watch your 6. As I hung up the phone, I walked to the window of my cottage, looking out at the gray winter sea. Somewhere out there, across that vast expanse of water, was a young woman with my jawline and her mother's eyes. A daughter I had never known. A piece of myself I had never realized was missing. I didn't know what would happen in New York. I didn't know if Alexandra was coming alone, or if Magdalena would be there too. I didn't know if this was the beginning of something, or the final chapter in the most painful story of my life. But for the first time since that email had arrived in Bagram and shattered my world, I felt something like hope. Not the desperate hope that sustained me through decades of war and loss, but something quieter and more resilient. The hope that even after the greatest betrayal, there might still be truth to be found. That even after 25 years of lies, something real might emerge from the ashes. Whether that meeting in New York would bring reconciliation or more pain remained to be seen. But I was finally ready to face whatever came next, not as Colonel Wheeler, not as a decorated soldier or the deceived husband, but simply as a man trying to make peace with his past and, perhaps, find a future he had never dared to imagine. The shadows of deception were still there, still following me. But for the first time in years, I was no longer afraid of what lurked in the darkness. Because sometimes, even in the deepest shadows, you find the most unexpected light. I spent 23 years in uniform, thinking I knew what sacrifice meant. I spent 25 years in a marriage believing I knew what love was. I was wrong about both. If you're watching this and you're in a military family, hug your loved ones. Tell them you appreciate their sacrifice. Before I end this video, I want to ask you, could you forgive someone who spent decades pretending to love you? Share your thoughts in comments.